We're going to answer this question before us. Let's give it a read. It says, if tan of x is equal to negative 1/3 and x is between pi and 2 pi, find sine of x and cos of x. Now, this is a Pythagorean identity question, but what makes it different to what we've previously seen with Pythagorean identity questions is that we're given tan instead of sine and cos. So how is that going to make things different? Well, if we think of our Pythagorean identity formula, it tells us this. And as you can see, we square sine, you plus it with the square of cos, and you get 1 out. Do you see how we've been given tan of x? There's nowhere to put that information into our formula. So that means we're going to have to approach this question a little bit differently. What I would recommend you do is first begin by drawing this. Okay, then once you've drawn that, you're then going to look at your domain, and your domain is from pi to 2 pi. So here's pi, here's 2 pi. So that means we're looking at our third and fourth quadrant. Now, as you can see, our tan value is negative. Now, if our tan value is negative, am I in the third or fourth quadrant? And hopefully you realize that we're going to be in the fourth quadrant. Now, we're still using our idea of Pythagoras to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a triangle in my fourth quadrant. And I'm going to call this angle here, and I'm going to see if I can draw that a bit nicer. Let's go Control Z, and it always does that. It always zooms out when I go Control Z. I'm going to put that angle there as x. Now, if I know that tan of x is negative 1/3, well, let's think. Tan is the same as opposite over adjacent. So opposite this would be 1, and adjacent would be 3. Now, because that's how it works, you know, opposite is 1, adjacent is 3. So opposite of this is 1, adjacent is 3. But it's got a negative, right? So now the question is this negative or is this negative? Well, just by seeing this, you can clearly see that this is going to be our negative value here. So it's my sine that would be negative because the y value is negative. My x is positive, so the cos value here is positive. Okay, so now I can find what the hypotenuse will be. And I'll find the hypotenuse simply by going 3 squared plus negative 1 squared, which is going to be 9 plus 1. And let's just say this is k, so this would be k squared. K squared. 10 is equal to k squared. That means plus or minus the square root of 10 is equal to k. Now, this is where this is a little bit different from what we've previously seen. We only consider this a positive. So the hypotenuse is always just positive. You don't consider it negative, nor do you consider it really positive. It's just kind of an absolute value. It's the length of that thing right there. So just don't worry about that. You're never going to consider this as a negative. Just leave it as a positive value there. And then once you've got that, we're kind of all done. Now we just need to figure out what the sine of x is going to be. And the sine of x is my opposite over hypotenuse. So that was going to be opposite hypotenuse. It will be negative 1 on the square root of 10. And then I have to figure out what my cos of x is going to be, which is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay, so adjacent over hypotenuse would be adjacent. It will be 3 on the square root of 10. So hopefully you can see how it is that we've approached this question. And yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So that is my answer. That is my sine. That is my cos. So not as we usually tackle a Pythagorean identity question, a little bit differently, but hopefully all that makes sense and you feel comfortable with these type of questions.